know them before they can get out of here today? A preacher, an elder, a deacon, a preacher's wife, and a kids class teacher. What do they all have in common? So, for one, these are all personal people I've known by name. I can tell you I've been to a couple different congregations and that I've attended now. Of course, over at Brooksville for a long time, and then of course I've been down at University in Tampa, one of the big congregations down there during school and everything. These are all people I know by name. I know them all personally. They are or have been respected men and women of faith. They, people that, I grew up with that just really good people. People you want to be around. People you want to know. But also, that preacher committed adultery with a female member. That elder abandoned his wife for another woman. The deacon was arrested for solicitation. The preacher's wife cheated on her husband with a member, and the woman teaching the classes had a relationship with a parent from that church. All those people. People I knew. What they all have in common is immorality. I could easily do 5 or 10 more people. I really could. If you're just getting back and just kind of going through everybody I know. Bible class, we kind of just talked a little bit about this morning. Sister Carla brought up a great point, and we kind of ran with it. But just from recent history, I can name, these people and have these experiences. And now, most of these have repented and turned back. I will say that. They've gone forward in the congregation. They've repented from their sins, and they've turned away. Probably like 5 out of 7. Okay? But, we talked last week, and remember last week we had a lesson on the devil and his agenda. Remember I said this was going to be kind of a 2-part lesson, and it's going to be a 2-part lesson, but this is a little different. We're going to concentrate really this morning on the subject of immorality. When we talked about last week, the devil's agenda. What's the devil's agenda? Kind of in one word, destroy. Right? Remember, it was destroy whether he doesn't want you in the church, or get you out of the church, or maybe make you unfruitful in the church. Destroy. So, this is all the devil's work, and damage was done. And, by the way, in terms of lust and pornography, let's add 2 more people. Another one lost their job, and another his life, their life. I was actually, and I don't have the one who lost his life to it. I don't have a personal experience with that, but I was given this story and kind of knew them indirectly. Okay, I'm not going to go, of course, into that story too much, but let me tell you now what they all had in common with you. Okay, and of course, when I say you, we know me too. I'm sitting out here. I'm just up here. Let me tell you what they all had in common with you. They knew Christ. They were baptized. They attended sound churches. They attended sound churches. They knew every verse on sexual sin. Okay, this wasn't just, you'd have had to know some of these people. These aren't just people who are like, who we think of as those people. They knew all these verses. Okay, you would not have thought. Really. You would not have thought. These people, they vowed to not do these harmful things. All have this in common. They share that in common with you and me. They all knew it. And they all did it. And yet the devil was able to influence them. Remember we talked about last week some ways that influence works with that re-asked answered questions. Re-ask previously answered questions and believe things that aren't true and then pursue something more to their hurt. We kind of use that illustration of Eve in the garden. Eve in the garden, it was such a simple thing. The interaction there was just normal interaction. I mean, I know it was a serpent in the form, and, we don't have that, but otherwise the conversation was fairly normal. There was nothing crazy about it, per se. So again, these people, this frightens me. It really does. I mean, it concerns me. Do I know the Bible any more than they do? I'm telling you, if you know these people, no. Do I have more faith or believe more in Jesus, believe more strong in Jesus? I mean, from what I can tell, no. Am I stronger than they were? Likely no. Okay, likely no. So how can this be stopped? How can this whole thing be prevented? And that's what, we're going to kind of talk about this morning. So, firstly, let's change that narrative on sexual sin. It isn't this awful thing that only a few people do. Can I get that straight? It's not this horrible thing. We're talking about immorality, by the way. If you didn't catch on, we're talking about immorality. This idea of this sexual sin. It's not this just indescribable, only a couple people go down that road. Never me. Only a few people have those kind of things. Only a small percentage of us are really susceptible to that kind of thing. Here's the thing. Immorality, I thought about this title, and you'll see where I'm going with it in a second, but immorality, everybody's problem. Okay? Immorality, everybody's problem. I think, that's kind of the first thing. This won't be, our ultimate title. As you can tell, I have our ultimate title already up here on the board, but it's kind of the place where we need to begin. Everybody's problem. A recognition that nearly none of us, okay, none of us are except from lust. We have to recognize that. Wrongly casting of the eye or immoral activities, we're all susceptible to those kind of things. Turn with me over to Galatians chapter 5. This is where we're going to begin our readings this morning. Galatians chapter 5, and I have a few numbers written up there. It's on page 1793 in your Pew Bibles. Galatians chapter 5, and we're going to look at a few different verses. I'll go ahead and pop them all up there. We're going to begin in verse 13. Verse 13, and then I'm going to go 16 through 17 and 19. You have it up there. Verse 13. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Go down to verse 16. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lust against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another. Contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. Okay? I think it's important to understand that. That you wish. There's still temptations, right? These are things that maybe you have desire for. Go down with me to verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanliness. We're going to go through a big list of them. Lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousy, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambition, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunken revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in past time, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Okay? And let me tell you, again, this isn't that, we have a tendency, remember last week I mentioned, everything's a good idea when it's my idea. Everything, all of a sudden, when I thought of it, when I'm going to go do it, well, I can justify that. That makes sense to me. Let me tell you, a lot of people can fall into this trap. Well, I got a couple of these, but, there's a couple in there that are quite a bit worse than what I'm working with. It's not what I read. That's not what that verse meant. Not that, if you just have a couple of these, you'll be good. As long as you're not a murderer or one of the ones kind of listed there at the end, a real bad guy. No. That's not what we just read. So, again, to kind of recap this, the flesh is always looking for an opportunity. We got to understand that. The flesh is always looking for an opportunity. Our spiritual inside of this just simply, okay? There's no just, again, baptism isn't magical like that. It's magical in the sense of, guess what? You're cleansed from your sin. But guess what? You still fight. We still have those temptations. So, and then of course, look at the first three things in verse 19 though. First three things in verse 19 would be kind of classified as sexual sins. These are things that are kind of right up front because they need to be tackled. It's something that applies to all. So, again, this is not to be taken for granted by anyone. I think that's something we have to understand. When I was down at university, I'll just tell this story real quick. University is a very big congregation, and they have elders and deacons and of the sort. And, we were teaching, Josh Creel was teaching a class at university, and it was a marriage class. And it was, he asked a question, raise your hand if you believe it is possible that you could ever be unfaithful to your spouse. And there were probably like 100 people in there that night. It was like a Wednesday night, and probably like 100 people, and everybody just sat on their hands, And there was one guy in the back of the room. One guy's hand went up. One guy raised his hand, and you know who he was? He was an elder there. He was an elder there at that congregation. I'll never forget. And he was the only one that answered correctly. Because you know what he said, man, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. And if you think it can't happen to you, that's where it gets dangerous. It can happen to anyone. So was he right? Yes, he was. Yes, he absolutely was. So here's what I'm not going to do this morning. Okay, I'm not going to proof text you for the next 30 minutes. We don't have a lot of time. We're already going over, but that's okay. Verse after verse, showing you all the forms of lust and immoral and sexual acts. I'm pretty sure, again, I know this group of people in here, most of you, and I know we can kind of identify the right from the wrong. I can go through and tell you where the verses are and everything, but we're not going to sit there and really go through that this morning. Instead, we're going to talk about why things like this happen to good people. Okay? We're going to talk about why things like this really happen to people who know the truth. Okay? Know those verses. Because let me tell you, I could sit here and give you, for the next 30 minutes, a whole bunch of verses on it, but they knew them too. They knew them too. So I think we need to talk really about what's going on here. So number one, we got to tackle this. My flesh. I think it all starts with this box right here. That old flesh. Not unlike David when he saw Bathsheba so long ago. We all remember that story. I hope we remember that story. Immoral desire has a way of shutting out everything and anything else. It just can take over your body. It takes over that flesh. It becomes everything except for my flesh and what it wants. The border on this box can be very thick and exclusive. It can really get to you. But we can each and all get to this point. See, that's the thing, I think we have to understand. Whenever sometimes I talked about it in Bible class this morning, sometimes you walk out that door on a Tuesday and man, let me tell you, you're in this box. You are in that box. And I'm sorry you can say, no, I haven't been, but I don't think that's true. I know, because I gave the example this morning. We walk out and man, and now I'm not necessarily saying the immoral box, even though that's what we're talking about, but we all know we have our own little worldly box that sometimes, man, it is thick and I'm just in it that morning. That's where I'm living right now. And we can't think about anything else. And when we do that, and no one else matters or enters into the next thing we do, anything is on the table for us. Any and everything is on the table for us. And it happens, guys. It happens. That's you. That's me. We're in that box, and let me tell you, when we are there, I'll do it, man. It's about me. Really. It gets about me. And we've all been there. Turn over with me to 1 John. I told you we'd touch on 1 John a little bit this morning. 1 John, and we're going to look at chapter 2. 1 John, that's on page 1865 if you're looking in your P-Bible. 1 John chapter 2, and we're going to look at 15 through 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. We've read that verse many times. We've read that verse many times. Don't love it. We got to keep perspective. I got to keep perspective. I told you, this happens. But know this, inside that box, there are three very strong ideas. There's flesh, there's eyes, and there's pride. Oh, that last. Man. And how they want to cut the world away to take us over. To cut out God, me time. I need that time. What is the secret to pulling the eye away from the straw and seeing more? Understanding more. Having wisdom to apply all the knowledge I've learned in Bible study. What is that? Well, if immorality is all about you, then morality is all about everybody else. So how it would have to be. If immorality is all about you, then morality must be just all about everybody else. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about. Number one is that flesh. But number two, we got to, we'll revisit what we talked a little bit about last week. We did a whole lesson on that last week. So we'll only briefly mention it this morning. We aren't going to spend too much time on this. But where temptation is, the devil is always in plan. There's always that whole thing that happened back in Genesis, early Genesis. When he got that ball rolling, we keep it rolling. He set this culture in motion and to try and get you to see only yourself, only us, and do immoral things. He knows hell is reserved for him and his demons, and guess what? He loves company. That's a thing. That's how life tends to be. We love company. Turn with me to Revelation. Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21. It's on page 1899. We're right down there near the end of the whole book. Revelation 21, verse 8. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. These people also, when you commit a sexual sin, when that immorality just takes over and that's what you're about, you're pleasing that flesh, man, you're right on board with this guy. Hey, keep cruising. You have the all clear. So we forget about that. It starts becoming about that. So let's move on. Did you know something, guys? That guy, the Lord, He's always in the room. You forgot about that. That might have been something we forgot about. I know I have a tendency to forget about it. He's always in the room. You can't do something in this flesh for your flesh, and it's not seen by God. I'll tell you even this. I don't know, the devil's powers and everything like that as far as being omnipresent and being inside your mind. But you know who can know your thoughts? That guy. You know, you don't have to be, see, because we're talking about, I know what you're thinking, you know, we're always thinking like, well, acting on it, that true adultery, that lust, pornography, whenever you're in that quiet place by yourself and you think your spouse, you know, or you think you're home alone. Wow. Look at there. That's what we have. God's always in the room, and guess what? Sin hurts him. He doesn't want you to. Now, I can go back. This you're right on board there. But here, you lost them. When someone leaves the faith and goes to selfish, immoral sin, and again, I'm talking about those same people we mentioned up there. I'm talking about you and me, because it can happen. I promise you. It's like driving nails in his son's hand again while he watches. It hurts. It hurts. You know, and a lot of times we can't just think because, you know, we're just like, we can't see them. You know, so we don't get to see that, and we're like, okay, you know, I'm sure that's all just kind of, you know, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm a pretty good guy overall. Turn with me to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians, and we'll look at chapter 6. That's going to be on page 1760 if you're following along in your P Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 18 through 20. Flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. That's a pretty interesting study. We probably need to have that on another time. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? Immorality in eye and mind, and certainly in body, is a direct insult to God. Think about that. That's a direct insult to our God. We are His temple. I mean, we know that this is His temple, but guess what? He gave us part of Him. You remember that back in Genesis? He breathed life into us. He made us in His own image. And guess what? When we go do that, whether it be in your mind, you know, that lust for another mate, or, you know, the lust for your coworker, or whatever it may be, that's an insult. That's a direct insult to our God. His Spirit, His love, His plan, you are where His glory resides on this earth. He wants you. He wants me. And to have that filled with evil desires and even to be tainted with sexual sin, it's, you know, it's sad. It's sad. You know, so for His sake, with full view of Him in the room, if we have been lured to the flesh or to serve the flesh with immoral sin, you know, we got to cleanse the temple. We got to give Him all, because we can't do that with all that going on inside of us. And never forget that He resides there with you. He is in the room. Well, I got news for you. Okay? I used to think that this was it. Okay? I used to think that this was enough. You know, kind of know the temptation of the devil and always recognize that God is in the room. You know, we've been taught that since we're little kids. You know, you can recognize those two things, recognize temptation, know that God's in the room, and you'll do well. You know, that'll be good for you. Well, I'm here this morning, and I will tell you that that is not always, I'm not going to say never, but that's not always quite enough. You know why? Because I've still seen good people who go to this. And you know what I've noticed, and I'm only 24 years old, but I've kind of caught on, and I don't know, we have this tendency to make deals or almost barter with God. You know, we have this tendency, yes, pornography again tonight, God. I know, but you know I'm getting better. You know I'm working towards it, and I've come a long ways from who I used to be. Let's face it. You know, I used to be this really bad person, but You know that. I'm coming along, and I'm really working towards that. And so, it's less frequent now, and you know how terrible I feel as long as I can justify it with my conscience. I'm not going to go to that sin again, hopefully one day. And so we do these kind of one-way deals. That it's our little monologue to God was the way out. We don't see God's face. We don't hear God's response to our hollow words, at least not then. So we need to add some more tangible reality to this list. Because guys, I've been there. That kind of just that I'm working on it. We're going to get there one day. But guess what? That's just a one-way deal. You can't sit there and talk empty words. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. And so we kind of have a tendency to do that. So I kind of want to put a little more tangible things on it. And I want to talk about this. Some things that you can see directly. We're talking about immoral sin here. Talking about immoral sin. My family. My family. All immorality excludes the effect upon and the consequences for the family. It pushed them aside, almost as if we are sure that they will not find out. That they will not find out, or we will not have to deal with any others knowing. We just forget about all of them. Sometimes we're the only person in that house, or in that world that we're living in. And it all just goes out the window. Turn with me again back to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5. We're going to look, that's on page 1800. Ephesians chapter 5, and I'll look at 22, 25, and then I'll go over to chapter 6. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Go with me to verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. Go with me down to 6, and I'm going to read 1 through 4 in chapter 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with promise that it may be well with you, and you may live long on earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord. And I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to tell you what I think that verse 4 means. I think a lot of times it's kind of, what this means in so many ways is that how can a father who's not showing that love, or maybe doing those different things, that hypocrisy, really be there for a kid? It's that this do what I say, not what I do. And you can't be a father that way. You're provoking your children. Your children see that, and maybe you get onto them, or you do whatever. You punish them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because that's not who you are. That's not who you are. That provoking. How can you be that father figure whenever you're not even right with God yourself? So again, it sounds good, doesn't it? Thoughtful even. Immorality forgets all of this. It forgets it all. That whole, you're your husbands. You're your wives. You honor them. You're theirs. And those children are yours, and they look at the way you do things and how you treat one another. And what you're doing, believe it or not, this story, I remember there was a kid on my baseball team, and it was a long time ago. But he had a little, I don't even know the name of their magazines, but it was a pornographic magazine basically. And you know where he got it from? His dad's truck. His dad's truck. And you know what? His mom came up and asked him where he got that thing from. And you know what the kid said? I got it from Dad's truck. Now, let me tell you, if you're going to be oblivious to it all and think that this stuff doesn't catch up with you, I got news. How do you think that felt? How do you think that felt? Really? That wife having to do that? That kid, what are you going to tell the kid? What are you going to do? That's not who you are. So again, what about your church family? You know, who are we to be for each other? How much we need a people of faith who will fight for what is right. How many churches have been decimated by adultery and fornication? I'll tell you, there's quite a few who have let that seep in, you know, and things got all about them. And now guess what? A church can fall apart. Because, again, guys, I'm not just saying this like oh, Max doesn't know what he... I've seen these people. I've respected these people. I've looked up to these people. And it can happen. You know, and again, I'm not downing these people. I don't want you to just think, oh, Max, this is a lesson about them. Too bad they're not here. No, that's not the point. You know, the point is that that's what we have to be diligent about. So again, that family, we got to think about that. So many times that goes out of our mind when talking about immorality. I'm trying to move along a little bit. I know I'm getting a little late. Here's another one for you. Very rarely, very, very rarely, do we ever think about this part when talking about an immoral sin. We never hardly think about the other person. The other person. And I'm going to do this. I'm not even going to go here because I hope we all know Matthew 19, talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And we can also go to Matthew 5. I don't want to go there right now. But we know that, guess what? Whenever you go and you decide to enter into that adulterous relationship with that other person, they might have been innocent before. They might have been innocent. Guess what? The marriage bed is undefiled, meaning that everybody involved in that marriage bed will be judged for that. You know what? So guess what? You now just put their soul, because you're me. It was about me. I got caught up in the flesh. Sorry, God. You know I'm working towards this. And let me tell you this too. There are some really good people. I've known a lot of good older people, been married for years. And their souls are in jeopardy because of what they decided to do as young ones. As young kids. And you can't. You can't put your soul at risk for that. And guess what you just did? You just put the other person. You never even thought about that. Well, I know this is a physical relationship, and I know what you're thinking. Well, maybe the lustful one, or maybe the pornography doesn't apply to me. Well, let me tell you, lust. You know what happens in a lustful relationship? A lustful relationship, there's only two outcomes. Okay, there's only two outcomes. Say you like another person. We use my wife Olivia. Say we weren't married and I like her, and if I tell her that, there's only two ways that this can end. If she finds out that I'm into that, she can either say, get away, I just ruined that relationship there, or she can say, well, me too, and I just ruined that relationship there. I just put, do you see where that comes along? Pornography. Very rarely do these men or women think about these young kids involved in this stuff. Really. The families that are being tormented because of what they're going through. And guess what? They're a multi-million-dollar business because people who are good people, are funding it. Are keeping it alive. And that's what we can fall victim to. And we never think about that. These are Christian people. We are Christian people. And can fall victim to not only saving souls, I talk about bearing fruit all the time, but destroying souls. Damning souls. Incredible. So, Hebrews chapter 13, I will read this one for us. Hebrews chapter 13, look with me in verse 3. This is on page 1847. Hebrews 13, verse 3. Remember the prisoners as if chained with them, those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. When you're involved in that, or you get someone else involved in that, they will, of course you will, you kind of settled with that one, they will be judged for that. That will be on there. So, again, this is our last point this morning, because I know I'm kind of going over. Their family. The person you are with, though you may be willing and you may have forgotten about your family, that person has one too. That person has a mom and a dad and family members who want the best for them. And you know what? Whenever you go and you just do whatever you want, you get that involved, you're putting them through torment. You're putting them through all that. Because they have to go through that when knowing that it's a son, a daughter, whoever that might be, there's only one. Because of what's going on. What about them? What would they think of what you are doing? How would it affect those people? Or their relationship with you? Turn with me to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians on page 1814. 1814. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 3 through 7. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God, that no one should take advantage of or defraud his brother in this matter. Did you see that verbiage there? Defraud. Take him, what does defraud mean? You pull the rights from, and see, I say family, might not even be mom and dad, might be another spouse. Guess what? Another spouse has rights to that person. We just read about the rights, how they belong to that person. You know what you do whenever you go in with your lustfulness, or maybe pornography, who knows? Of course we recognize with adultery, you defraud that person of their rights to them. Continuing on, for God did not call us to uncleanliness, but in holiness. So again, this can help us with lust and pornography. Those people are not objects, but they are daughters, mothers, sons, and fathers, and their family counts on them. Counts on them. And if they are good and mourns for them, if they are behaving sinfully, I feel for them and do not want to contribute to that. So now the last thing right here, you knew this one was coming. I couldn't get through this lesson because you know how many times we forget about this very last thing here. This very last thing. I hope we don't forget about it. Your soul. Your soul. It takes selflessness of the flesh to give time and attention to the soul. Greed in the flesh often associates with money or immorality. It ignores the needs of the soul to serve that carnal desires of the flesh. But the Bible has tons to say about it. Tons to say about it. We're going to finish with this. Turn with me over to Luke. Luke chapter 12. I'm not going to read the whole thing for time purposes. But Luke chapter 12 on page 1608, if you're following along your Pew Bible. 1608. Jesus is giving a really great sermon here. He's talking to them. And he goes on, and I understand this is not talking about, this is more talking about wealth in this version. Okay, this is talking about wealth and not so much the immorality, but I really think it applies to both. Okay, so he's giving a great sermon about, this idea of money and everything, and all of a sudden, look with me in verse 13. Okay, in verse 13, one of them speaks up from the crowd, okay, and says to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." He was so wrapped up back in that flesh box. Jesus is in the middle of speaking, and this guy's like, you know what? Here's perfect. All he's thinking about is, man, me. And so he's like, I got a perfect opportunity, Jesus. You can fix it. Tell my brother to divide his inheritance with me. Go down with me and you're going to recognize this story in verse 16. We're going to pick up the story in verse 16 and we'll read down through 21. I want you to notice as we read through this some of the pronouns used. Then he spoke a parable to them saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, he even has to talk to his soul. I mean, he's separating this. I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Verse 20, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. You fool. Time's now. We have no time left. This is who we are. This is we belong to God. And when we go into all this stuff, and I'm not even going to go back here, whenever we go in and it gets all involved with us and it starts becoming about me again, all these people get jeopardized. And guess who even gets jeopardized? I. You want to talk about me and want to make it about us so much? Well, there it is. It is about us. And we will be lost. And that soul, that eternal being that God put inside of us, will be lost forever. So this morning, this is the portion whenever I ask anyone who would like to come forward if they're struggling with these things. And times have kind of changed. And back a little while ago, apparently, I don't even remember them, the whole front row would have been filled up because that's what people felt the need to do. But let me tell you, it's all of us. It's all of us that are working on these things. So I do extend the invitation this morning. If you need to come forward for any reason, ask for prayers of the congregation because it applies to all of us and it does get hard. Or if you haven't gone down to that water grave baptism,